This is our weekly webinar for Thursday, the 13th of May, and this is Patrick speaking. Want to thank you for joining us today. We have an often talked about topic that we don't talk about in webinars very often, and so we're talking about form versioning today. We're going to show you two techniques, and then we're going to follow up next week with one of the techniques regarding data. I'll talk more about that in a second. Before we get started, I've got a couple of questions for you, and I'm just going to launch this poll here just to get us in the right frame of mind. When you're using, you should see the poll on your screen here. And the question is, when you have to change your form's data source, when you change the fields you're collecting in your form, what do you do? Do you add the fields? Do you delete the fields? Do you create a new form template? And we're going to talk, this is kind of to set the stage here in terms of the perspective, because we're going to talk about why deleting and renaming fields can be a problem. And we're going to show you how to do the simple and the more complex here as part of this webinar. So thanks for that. Looks like most of you are saying the first one. That's great. Actually, we have one person saying the last one. So I'm going to close this poll out, and I'm going to switch to the other one. And once again, this is another question for you as we get started here. What do you do with the old data? So if you're just adding items, then that's not going to be a big issue because it will update in place. So that's number one. If you're renaming, deleting things, then that will be an issue and you have to throw them away unless you're doing something advanced like we're going to show you today. And then obviously, if you're trying to map using a tool, that's even more advanced. And we have one person saying that. So you must be using some kind of XML mapping tool. So we'll be talking about that also today. And thanks. I guess most of you are saying that number 3 option there, which is interesting because that is pretty advanced. Okay, those are the quick 2 polls, and we are now at the start of our webinar. So thanks again for joining. Really happy today to have Kirby and Joanne with me. They are the ones who are responsible for all the hard work that went into this webinar last night, and the slides as well. So they're gonna be doing demos here in a second. Kirby, can you hear me okay?
Yes, Patrick, yeah.
Great. So we are talking about upgrading forms today, form versioning, and there's really 2 approaches to this. There's upgrading in place and the creating side-by-side, and those kind of hinted at in the poll that you just saw. And but sometimes you have to transform the data, so we're going to talk about that. So if you have side-by-side versions, but you want to transform the data from the old version to the new version, you need some kind of a tool. We'll show you that as well. So just to talk about this for a second before we do the demos. So this is the topic today. It's like, what do you do when you have to update your form? And updates can happen frequently, once a month, once every 2 months. Every time your users want something new to be collected, some new data set to be collected, you're going to be adding fields to your form. And that's what we call a form template change, and that allows you to collect new data, obviously. Now, sometimes you'll have a form that was designed poorly. Everyone just dragged and dropped the controls, the fields into your form, and you ended up with a data source with things like field 1, field 2, field 3, group 1, group 2, group 3. And because the field names are nonsensical or they're not telling you what the data is, you might have to change your form template to make it easier for doing reporting. And we'll talk a little bit about that too. So that's a much more serious change. And when these change, you have to then change the data as well. Today's webinar is about changing the form template. We're going to talk about 2 scenarios, the small gap, the monthly update, and then the larger gap. This is the big change that you have to create a whole new schema because the design was poor, or because you're making such a large change and you want to delete some fields that you really have a more of a more of an extensive change. And so this is kind of the idea of having the side-by-side. So next week we'll talk about the form data changes. So within your form, you can also have versioning, right? So there's 2 different things we're talking about here. We're talking about versioning at the form template level, and then versioning within your form. This is form to form. So characters can change within a field, fields can change from one edit to another, your form can change when you submit it or approve it. And then you might want to keep versions of all submitted forms. So we'll talk about this. This is different, but this is also versioning of data as opposed to versioning of the data source design. And we'll talk about this next week. Okay, so first of all, the easy changes, once a month, you're going to be watching our webinars. You're going to see something new that you want to add to your forms, or maybe you're going to be responding to an in-house customer request. They want to add some new fields to collect some new data. So you're going to be making a change to your form template. And then the more significant overhauls, maybe once a year. Now, when you're doing a significant overhaul, you've got a challenge. You've got to map one data source to another. We're going to talk about that in a second. But let's show the first technique demo here. And this technique is really to update the form in place. And I'm going to hand the mic and the screen share over to Kirby, and she's going to show you this. Kirby?
All right, so I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, let me know if you can now see it.
Yep.
All right, so for the first demo, I'll be showing you the patient consent form, which was the form we used in our Qdabra forms training 2 weeks ago. So this form is a very simple one, yet lots of cool features in it. So we built this form to have this really interesting CSS trick, the floating labels. So when you hover over a control, the field label floats above it. So it kind of makes the form look interactive to users. So I'm gonna fill out this form real quick here. Um, choose random address. And this form also has this glass signature functionality, which is a very convenient feature to use when you need to capture your user signatures. So this form is also mobile responsive, so which means that the layout and the fields adjusts to the screen of your device, whether you're using an iPad or phone to open the form. So if you're interested in adding these features to your forms, I highly recommend you watch our recent Qdabra Forms training on YouTube. We also have free training labs that you can download for free from our community website, theinfopathdev.com. So let's submit this form. And so once that's submitted, it should go to this library, the patient consent form library. So this is the one that we just submitted. And this library is configured to open forms using the version 1 of the patient consent form. And we set that up using the Forms Viewer Extensions app. And this is the app that we use to enable opening forms in Forms Viewer from the form library. So this configuration is done using a customized SharePoint site page, and this is where we set up which form template to use when opening forms
Kirby,
from
can
a
you show
specific
the
form
form
library.
V1 in the designer first, just to show them what this data
Yeah,
source looks like?
sure. So this is our forms designer. As you can see, this is the form, the patient consent form. And in here, we have the schema of that form. So we have the personal info, phone details, and signature section. So I'm going to show you the difference later as compared to the version 2. The version 2 has the file attachments group in here. We also have the attachment control in here where users can attach their medical records, for example. So yeah, that's the difference of the version 1 versus version 2 form, patient consent form. So going back to the FB extensions config, so for example, if we select the patient consent form library here, we're going to see that the template name specified here is the version 1.
Sorry to jump in, Kirby. Before you do this step, though, can you show them what the form looks like when you open it again from the library with the V1? Just
All
to
right, so,
verify that it opens with the same expectation of the V1. What is it, 164? I forget the version number.
all right, so if I open, you want me to open a new form or
Just open the one
the,
you just submitted, just to show that
all
it
right,
opens in the old version. The normal scenario is that they submit something and it opens in once. It's in the bottom left-hand
Mm-hmm.
corner. She's got the version displayed. So this is the form she just submitted, and just to show that we haven't. There's no smoke and mirrors here. It's just opening with the V1, and now you're going to show
Mm-hmm.
how you can associate the library with the
Yeah.
V2, right?
Yeah. So to associate the V2, we just update this to version 2, informs your extensions configuration and apply changes. So that's going to point to this template page here where we've uploaded the version 2. And then once we go back to our library here and open the one that we just submitted 3 minutes ago, if I open this, the expectation is that it should open using the version 2. Hmm, let me try to go back to
Look
the
at the
library again.
debug window. Is there another bug in the update? I'm just kind of curious.
Maybe it's not yet reflecting the changes that I added or
You think
added
it's a
in the
caching issue?
thing.
Maybe it's a caching issue.
Yeah,
Yeah,
perhaps. Yeah.
try it again. Yeah.
Let me just try to refresh it.
I mean, it says
Um,
165 though at the bottom. So go to the debug. Look at the debug there. So it's failing to insert again. You guys fixed this earlier.
yeah, I fixed this earlier. I'm not sure what happened, but when I tested this earlier, I'm seeing.
Yeah, I mean, so what it should be doing is it is opening it in the new version because that's the version at the bottom. It's just that it's not inserting those. When you add a new repeating structure to a form, like let's say she's changing the V1 form and she's adding this repeating attachments like she showed in the designer. Um, and it'll add it to the old form, but you have to insert a row so that it shows up in the view. And the problem with the insertion right now is that you've got the command is now that looks good. What did you just do?
Yeah, this one's opening and it's showing the attachment. I'm not sure what happened there.
Maybe it's because the old form is associated with the old version, but no, it's opening in the new version. It's got 165 at the bottom. Okay, well we'll come back to that in Kirby.
Yeah.
But I think that so just another point to mention to folks is that this is we're the only ones out there with the easy info path migration path. I'll talk more about this at the end of the webinar, but the forms designer that you just saw, we launched about a month ago, and our goal is to keep updating it just like we have with Form Zero over the last 5 years and keep adding features to it. The forms designer, we're calling it a beta right now. We've just actually been doing a couple sprints and we've been adding new features. We have a 2-week sprint cycle, and by August we think we'll be essentially have all the critical features done for the forms designer, so you won't have to be using InfoPath Designer anymore. But these forms that she's opening, um, this is just InfoPath format. So the one difference between what we're doing with Form Zero and Forms Designer and what other companies are doing is that we're allowing you to take those forms that you already have and just move them forward in as is without major modifications. Even though these look quite modern, you can quickly add features to make them that way. Kirby, can you show the form opening in the InfoPath Designer just to download it from Form Zero and show them how it's still opening, it's still backward compatible. In fact, let's do this. Go to the Forms Designer and make a small change to the V2 form. Just maybe change the name at the top to be, yeah, something like that, or whatever. And let's download that then, save it and download it and show them that this is opening, still backward compatible with InfoPath. We're trying to retain the look and feel of the InfoPath Designer so that you know it, you don't know where to go to make changes to your forms. So Kirby just saved this using the Forms Designer, and she's opening it now in InfoPath, showing that it is backward compatible. Great job, Kirby. Okay, so I'm going to quickly take over the presentation again here, and if you don't mind, and
All right.
thanks. And go back to our slides. So that was our first demo. So the first demo is showing that if you need to make a change to an initial form, and this is really what she's doing here. She's adding this new repeating attachment field group actually to the form, so she can actually the user can actually upload or attach multiple documents. And the best practice is to put that repeater, that attachment group, which has a repeating blue icon on it. The best practice is to put that within another group that is not repeating, so a parent group, file attachments. And the reason for that is just schema design. We've talked about the reason before. It's relatively esoteric reason, but it is good schema design because it makes it obvious. If you have it the same level as a signature section, so there's no parent group node, then it's ambiguous which attachment you're on. So it's better to have it in a non-repeating parent group so that it's the XPath, the XML path to the inner nodes is not ambiguous. Okay, so that's what we just did. Now the second technique, which Joanne I think is going to demo, or maybe Kirby's going to do it again, is when something really big changes. So you've got a lot of changes. You need to delete nodes because there's some old nodes in your data, or you need to rename them. That's a pretty big change. That's a once a year kind of a thing. And for this, we recommend creating a whole new form. You can copy the view from the old form and just change the data source and then add everything you need for the new form. Or you can just create a whole new form and then associate it with the same library. And so we're going to show this technique next. The reason why this is interesting is because for that old data, we want to keep your data integrity. We also want to have people open those old forms and see the old data as it was submitted. So right, because they submitted something, then you change the form in a major way. They want to open the old data and say, yep, that's the form I submitted. That's the one I signed. Yep, that's good. But then also give them an option to upgrade that data. And so we're going to show both of those. Joanne?
Okay. Okay, just trying to find out how I can share my screen here. Okay, there we go. So for this demo, I'm going to use the other form, which is the training survey form that we used in the previous training. And this is the before version of the form that you're seeing, and uploaded it in Forms Designer. So so this is a typical survey form with questions and option button for answers. And you're not seeing the questions right now because it's in a calculated value above the option button selection here. But what I'm going to show you is the data source for this version. So as you can see, for each question, we have separate fields for them, and for each answer we also have separate fields. And this is not the best practice for designing forms because this is not normalized. So as you can see, for each question you create one field, and for each answer you create one field. So that's a lot of fields right there. So if you have this kind of data source in one of your forms, we recommend normalizing it. So if you come to a point that you want to change the version of your form and normalize it, this is the way to do it. So I'm now showing you the after form, the V2 version of the training survey form. And the change that we did is to have a repeating group for the question. So this is now the normalized version where I only have one question field and one field for the answer. So,
And I think that just a quick point here is that this makes it less maintenance work for the the person who's maintaining the form. If there's a new question, there's a variable number, you can manage that. It's not fixed to 10. If it's less than 10, it'll handle that, and it's just easier to maintain the form because you've only got the one repeater in your view. You don't have to edit everything. Now, is this calculate value thing, is that a bug in Forms Designer, Joanne?
Yeah, the value is still not showing in Forms Designer. We're still working on that. Yeah, but if you view it in info path here, it's showing the value here. And yeah, so the value I'm supplying by a default value from here. Yeah.
So you're using an advanced data fill technique, and we just haven't tested that in
Yeah.
Forms Designer yet. That's interesting. Yeah, and this is interesting because well, I guess if you go into the new one in InfoPath Designer and show them where your well, I guess maybe you should just show the demo first, maybe, and then go back and show the data in the new form design and how you're storing the question text.
Okay. So let me go to the form library. Okay, so this is the training survey form library, and I have already configured that form library to open my, let's see, my V1 form. So as you can see here, it's opening the V4 form. So the V4 is the V1 form. So if I open the forms viewer icon here, it's going to open that template. So this is the V1 form. This is the indication that we're on V1. So I put that here, and also you can see the solution version here. And yeah, so fill this out. Okay. Okay, testing. And I'm going to submit. Okay. Okay, so let's open it. So because the extension is configured to open V1, so we're still on V1. But as you can see, I have a button here at the top to allow me to convert this document to the V2 template. So when I click this, it will convert it to the after version I showed you, which is the normalized version. Yep. So as you can see, we've retained the data here. It still looks the same. You can't tell that we switched to V2 because it's not very visible here, but it's a repeating table, and it has retained the values correctly. So I just show you my designer or my debugger here. I'm using I'm using change connection URL because I'm querying the XML to get the data, and I have a get input parameter for the button that I clicked, and when the form detected that, it's going to transform my form to this new template. And so to show you what's happening on the background there, maybe I can use the forms designer as well. So this is the V2 form, and in finish loading, we've got rules here. So this is the part where I'm getting the form name, the parameter for the form name that I'm opening, and concatenating the form URL, and I'm using the change connection URL to change the data connection for the XML and transforming it. So I'm using this transform command with an XSLT file, which I didn't create. So this is the XSLT file that Jimmy prepared earlier. And in order to create something like this, you need to have knowledge to create XSLT files. Yeah, so this is one requirement for the transform command to work. So
Can you show the
I
data
guess
in XML, like just open it up in like?
yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. So let me download that. So yeah, so as you can see, it's now a repeater here, as opposed to the previous version, which is just has separate
Actually,
fields.
that's not a repeater. Joanne, that's the old one.
Oh, this is the old one?
I think
Oh,
so.
because we didn't submit.
Yeah, I didn't edit it, so
It's good that
I
we did
just
that though.
opened it.
Yeah, go ahead and submit it and see it change. Because I'm
Yeah,
really glad that you had that that proves that it was in the old format. So you can do it again and then download it or submit it or
yeah,
whatever.
remember again, and then so like I'll edit and okay, submit. Okay, and let's go back and let's download again. Let me check that. This is the one, right?
You might want to refresh that library just to make sure that it's not cached or something. Assuming that.
Actually, tried that a while ago, and I confirmed that it transform. Yeah, this one.
Very different. Yeah, that's much better.
Yeah, this one.
Okay, and yeah, it's obvious there because all of the labels are the same. There's not hard coding of the number of the question. So the question, and show them in the designer where that data actually, if you go into InfoPath, just show them where that default data is being stored. We need to get a case entered for the forms designer so that we can show default data.
Here.
People have questions. This might be a good time to start asking any questions. But so really what Joanne is showing you is this more advanced technique when the schema changes in a major way. How do you handle it? And you obviously are going to have two forms associated with that library or wherever the forms are kept. But then you also want to have a tool maybe that upgrades those old ones. And so you can see here that as she's clicking on the question text down below, there are the question default values. This is how you add the default labels in a data-driven, normalized way, and which is good for reporting. It's good for maintenance. It's, lots of reasons for this. So thanks, Joanne. This is wonderful. Great job.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to quickly share back and summarize for everyone. Okay, so once again, because the data formats are different, you need to be aware that anything that's relying on that old format may not work anymore. For example, a workflow. And reporting gets more complicated. And that's really why we want to provide this tool, this transform to do the new, so that the data will report the same way, whatever workflows, the new workflows will continue to work with the new data. And these XSLTs aren't really that hard. You see that the XSLT that Joanne showed, it was like one page. We're more than happy to help you create those. That it should only take a few minutes to do these, and love to support you on that. InfoPath is an XML technology. FormZero supports InfoPath format. We're presenting this future to you that includes a lot more than what InfoPath had, including commands like transform that allow you to take form from the old version and move it to the new version. So that's what she showed. She had a very big schema change. She went from this non-normalized schema data source to a normalized one, and to transform that we had that command. So while we're waiting for your questions, if you have any, I just want to quickly talk about Qdabra Forms. It's our new brand for FormZero and Forms Designer. Now that we've shipped Forms Designer, we have rebranded FormZero as Forms Design, Qdabra Forms, which includes Forms Designer now. Not only are our forms the most beautiful and the most feature-rich, in terms of the document-centric, they give you the lowest path forward to move off of InfoPath. So for those of you on the call that have not adopted FormZero, this is the major value proposition. It's not just about changing your forms, and recreating them, which is what you'd have to do if you move to something else like Power Apps or one of these other providers. But you also have to move the data over, right? And that's a huge chore. So we estimate that creating new forms from scratch can cost anywhere from $1,000 or $2,000 up to 10 or 20, depending on how many fields you have in the form. And so you're saving that cost by adopting FormsViewer. We have the lowest licensing structure cost. Once you're in FormsViewer, it's per tenant. There's no limitations on the number of users or the number of form templates. And so that obviously we're a consulting company first, but we've created this cool technology for you to move your forms over very fast, very low cost, and tons of new features. The forms are going to look better than anything else in the market. Power Apps doesn't support CSS. The other vendors that have new forms technologies out there don't really support repeaters like InfoPath and FormsViewer do. They're not these structured XML documents. They're basically list forms. And the problem with that is that when you try to sign something or you want to keep everything together in one document payload, they just fail because they don't support that. They try to map everything to a list structure. So anyway, we're here to help you. Obviously, really appreciate you being on this webinar today. And I don't know if we have any questions. It looks like we do not. But next week we'll be back again talking about when you have data, what are the ways in which you want to show the difference as it changes. So your forms go from, when you're making edits to your forms, sometimes you want to show the edits in a graphical way. Think of Word when you're doing revision tracking. We'll show that demo next week. We'll also show how to keep track of field level form changes. So as you're, if you think of yourself as being in a hospital emergency room, you need to know which physician signed what. So you need to know at a field level what the data changes were. And then, of course, with workflow, this is a more common scenario where you've got people that submit something, people that approve something you want, and make sure you know what the history is. And sometimes you want to keep every single version as well. So we'll show these techniques next week and hope you can make it. I want to thank Joanne and Kirby again for all their hard work and successful demos. Great job, gals. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Have a great day,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Take care.